Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you a painful bug with drag and drop in browsers and a new workaround that I've created called the honeypot fix. Alright, so in this example here I have a navigation that can be resized. Now this is actually using the browser's built-in drag and drop functionality. And these items here, when I hover over them, they turn green, and when I mouse down they turn blue on them. Now, what the bug is in the browsers is that when you depress the pointer to do a drag and drop operation, the browser continues to think that the pointer is depressed at that location, even though the user's can have moved quite far away from that point. So what that results in is, let's say I'm going to come over here, I'm going to mouse down, and I'm going to start pulling this, dragging to the left. You'll see that items are now, the browser's saying, hey, you're now actually over that square, right? And this will be wherever the user's pointer was when the drag started, right? This can also affect sort of list items as well. So let's say I've got here and I want to pull this item down in the list. Well, if I scroll this list, you'll see that it's starting to hover over, according to the browser, I'm now hovering over items higher in the list. And that's because the browser still thinks that the pointer is depressed at that location. And you'll also notice that that element is getting a mouse enter event. You can tell that by the enter count incrementing as I'm going down. Now that's a problem too, because you might have something like a tooltip on your element, which is listing for mouse enters. Now, according to the spec, the browsers are not allowed to send mouse events during the drag, but this is something that is happening. So during the drag, an element can incorrectly be marked by the browser as being over by the user's pointer, which results in hover styles and events being published. But this bug can also occur when the drop finishes as well. So in this particular interface, what's going to happen is when you drag an item and you drop it on another one, it swaps those items. So what I'm going to do now is drag card 0 on the top of card 2, which is going to swap their positions. Right. Now, interestingly, you'll see that now card 2 has moved into the top. Let me do that again. Boom, boom. There we go. Card 2 is now in the position of that card 0 was in. So it's now in the first position. And it's now got the active styles being applied, and it had a mouse enter event. So this is pretty painful. Like, again, to use that tooltip example, let's say that it was doing something in response to mouse events. Now, even though the user's moved an item down, potentially down the list, that top item has been entered into, which can lead to some sort of weird behaviors. Now, this bug goes away as soon as the user interacts with the page in some sort of meaningful way. So whether they move something with the keyboard or move the pointer, the bug just sort of gets removed. It gets resolved, sorry. The browser no longer thinks that you're over that position. You can't, unfortunately, fire any kind of fake events to tell the browser that it's no longer there. It requires some sort of user engagement to know that the pointer's actually not there anymore. Now, this bug is basically the same in Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. They all kind of have this problem. Now, I've helped create a library called Pragmatic Drag and Drop, which is a library that sits around the web platform's drag and drop functionality and sort of covers over some of these friction points and bugs inside the platform. Now, inside of Pragmatic Drag and Drop, we have shipped a partial fix to this issue for a long time. And how that fix works is after the drag finishes, we put a style rule in the head where we disable pointer events on every element on the page except for what the user is over. So that lets the user continue to engage with what they've moved or what they've been dragging or wherever their pointer currently is, but prevents the pointer from sort of entering into these other elements that it shouldn't enter into after a drag finishes. Now to visualize what that looks like, instead of setting pointer events, what I'm going to do is change the background color. So now when I drop this item, you'll see that pink is being applied to everywhere that pointer events aren't allowed, and green where pointer events is allowed, right? So anything kind of over that in that green area, once the user finishes dropping, they're allowed to keep kind of engaging with. Otherwise, we block everything. And as soon as the user moves their pointer in any way, we clear that, right? And this fix works pretty well. It does block the post-drop issue where after dropping, a card gets an event, which it shouldn't get. But it doesn't do anything to prevent what's like the case where I'm, say, scrolling here. And you can see that enter value is incrementing on this example, right? They're just kind of continuing to tick up because it's continuing to kind of like enter into that element as I scroll. Now, there's actually two more problems with this particular fix. The first one is that after the user finishes a drag, if they dropped over a scroll container, if the first action they did was a scroll, either by a mouse move or a trackpad scroll, that scroll sometimes wouldn't work. And that's because we're disabling pointer events probably on the scroll container around that element where it is now. And so that scroll wouldn't happen. And unfortunately, the wheel event was not enough for the browser to sort of start working correctly again. So the workaround for this, I mean, the impact of this is pretty small. All the user would have to do is just move something ever so slightly and things would work again, but not ideal. And the second problem is that if you have a lot of elements on the page, like a lot of elements, setting pointer events to none on all of them can cause a pretty noticeable style recalculation. So not a great experience for performance, especially on sort of very, very big pages. So how this fix works is that we add an element to the page just after the drag starts. So in the frame after the drag start event. And we're going to put that element on the topmost layer. So it sits above the whole everything else. We're going to use position fix on that. We're going to keep it in the same place for the duration of the drag. And it's going to sit where the user had depressed their pointer, right? Where the browser currently thinks the pointer is depressed. And so this new element will now become the target of that pointer depression. So it's going to be the one that's hovered over and gets the mouse enter event. And it's going to keep that for the duration of the drag because it's sitting on top underneath where the user's pointer is depressed. So here's what it looks like. What I've done is I've increased its size a bit and changed its color so you can see what it's doing. So when the drag starts, see how that element there has been created and added to the DOM. So you can see now that, okay, that's where it started. And as I'm moving, those elements behind it are no longer getting the hover styles applied or mouse events because the browser just thinks I'm over that element. So let's have a look at it inside the list now as well. So here you've got that red square being added. And as I scroll, you'll see the hover's not being applied to anything and the events aren't happening. Now, when the drag finishes, we have to keep that square there for a little bit until the user moves their pointer, when that bug kind of disappears, and then we get rid of that element. It's gone. So this fix works surprisingly well. Now, in reality, the box actually only needs to be 2 pixels big. So you can see that tiny dot there is only how big it needs to be. And we make it transparent as well so that a user doesn't even see it. And there is some code in there to handle, okay, well, what happens if they actually do drag over that? We have some code there to sort of, okay, if they kind of drag over this honeypot element, we kind of want to ignore it and look up whatever was actually going to be behind it and use that as the starting point for looking up drop targets and other things like that. So here's the resizing example, but now with the transparent, square. Wonderful. Looks so great. Perfect. There were some complexities in creating this fix. One of them was, well, where do you put this little box in the first place? So it turns out it's not exactly where you might expect. So how browsers work is the events you get when you're doing a drag operation is you get a pointer down, then you get a few pointer moves, and then you get a drag start. Now, it turns out through trial and error that this bug the events and the browser will think the pointer is still depressed at that last pointer move event coordinates and not the drag start coordinates, which seem to match where the pointer down was. So you want to use we have to use that last pointer move coordinates to place the box. Now, unfortunately, in Firefox, they actually release a few pointer moves after the drag starts. There's only a couple, and it only happens just when the drag starts. And what we need to do in Firefox is actually move the box, the honeypot element, to be where that last pointer move event was, to correctly absorb all of the events in Firefox. There was also a complexity about how big do you make this square? And there is a mismatch between some of the values you get from events, the coordinates on the screen, and hitbox testing, because some of them are subpixel and some of them aren't. So it turned out, seems to be the safest to make it make the box a little bit bigger and push it back and extend it out and make it a 2x2 kind of square. So that way we can kind of be sure that we are actually absorbing all of the events across kind of different browsers as well. When browsers fix this bug, we can remove this workaround from pragmatic drag and drop. If you're looking to use the web platform's drag and drop functionality, but you don't want to have to deal with any of this kind of wildness, I would encourage you to check out pragmatic drag and drop. It just makes using the web platform's really powerful drag and drop functionality quite easy. Also, creating these videos is a little bit of an experiment for me. So if you've kind of found value in this, you found it pretty interesting, please feel free to let me know in the comments. All right, bye.